Listen to me, Nigerians. This one is not just small talk anymore. This is a warning, a direct warning. When a professor comes out publicly and says, if Tinubu rings in the north, there will be trouble. You don't brush that aside. You don't laugh over it. Because that statement is not just about politics. It is about tension building inside the country. Now let's break it down properly. He is saying the north, the same north that gave over 60% of the vote, is no longer aligned. That is a serious claim. Because in Nigerian politics, once a major voting blocks begin to withdraw emotionally, not just politically, you are looking at a potential storm. And you heard him clearly. He said, if you show us results that don't match reality, there will be consequences. Because this is where it gets dangerous, not just for politicians, but for the entire country. Because elections in Nigeria are not just about numbers, they are about perception of fairness. The moment people believe the process is manipulated, that is when instability starts knocking. Now let's go deeper. The professor didn't just talk about election, he talks about anger. He talks about hunger, insecurity, marginalization, suppression of opposition voices. He painted a picture of a region that feels ignored and used. And whether you agree with him or not, that perception alone is powerful enough to shape 2027. Now, here is where it even gets more intense. He accused the government of using agencies, EFCC, DSS, ICPC, as tools to silence opposition. That is a heavy allegation, because once citizens start believing the institutions are no longer neutral, trust collapses. And when trust collapses in a democracy, everything becomes shaky. Now let's not pretend. He also made it personal, talking about arrest, intimidation, people being grabbed. He is not just speaking as an analyst, he is speaking as someone who feels targeted. And that kind of narrative spread fast, because Nigerians already have a history of distrusting power. Now, here is the real issue nobody wants to confront. Is this one exaggerated, or is it reflection or something deeper happening beneath the surface? Because you can dismiss one voice, but when multiple voices start echoing the same frustration, you need to start paying attention. Now, look at the political chessboard here. Governors aligning, opposition regrouping, not recalculating, South watching. This is not just politics anymore. This is positioning for survival. And in that kind of environment, statements like this are not random. They are signal of what could come if things are not handled carefully. But Nigeria must also be careful, because fear can be used as political tools. Warning can be used to shape narrative, and narrative can influence decision. Now, this is where it gets even more dangerous. This is no longer just about one professor speaking. This is about growing language of resistance. Listen carefully to the tone. People are fed up. There are no pathway. There will be trouble. These are not casual words. These are emotional signals coming from a region that feels pushed to the edge.
So President Bola Ahmed Tinubu thinks it is these governors that he procured that will make him president.
And history has shown us, when political frustration mixed with economic hardship, it doesn't stay as talk for a long time. It evolves. Now, look at what it tied everything to. Not just election, but survival. It talks about hunger. It talks about insecurity. It talks about people unable to afford basic medication. That is not politics anymore. That is daily suffering. And when people start connecting their suffering directly to leadership, that is when patience starts running out. Now, here is something very critical he exposed, whether intentional or not. He said the North held back its anger because of clerics. Think about that. He is saying religious voices has been calming people down, telling them to endure, to be patient, to pray. But then he also said something else, that even those clerics may no longer be able to control the situation. That is a red flag, because once the traditional stabilizer, religion, community leader, elders loses influence, the system becomes unpredictable. Now let's talk about the idea of ringing in measured, because that word alone can ignite tension faster than anything else. In Nigeria, elections are already sensitive. So when influential voices start suggesting that results may not reflect reality, they are indirectly preparing people to reject outcome. And that is where things can go spiral. But let's also flip the coin, because this is important. What if this is also part of political pressure? What if this warning are meant to force the system to behave differently? Because sometimes in politics, you don't just wait for fairness, you demand it loudly before the game even starts. So this could be two things at the same time: a genuine warning and a strategic move. Now look at the bigger picture. He didn't just criticize, he completely dismissed the president's chance. He said it will be the easiest to remove. That is not analysis, that is confident projection. And in politics, confidence is contagious. If people start believing that power is shifting, they begin to act differently. Alliances change, loyalties weaken, structures start cracking. That is how political tension begins, not with result, but with belief. Now, here is the bottom line Nigeria must understand. This is not just noise. This is not just another TV interview. This is part of the larger narrative war already shaping 2027. One side is saying we are still in control. Another side is saying the people are no longer with you. And somewhere in between, the truth is still being contested. So the real question is not who is shouting louder. The real question is what is actually happening on the ground. Because when election time comes, it won't be TV interview that will decide the outcome. It will be the real people, real votes, and real reactions. This one right here, this is where everything just completely breaks down. Because now you have Professor Usman throwing a direct warning. Not analysis, not theory, a warning. He is talking about Bola Ahmed Tinubu like this is a ticking time bomb. Not politics as usual, a ticking time bomb. So let me slow it down for you, because a lot of people are still playing game with the conversation. When Professor says if Tinubu rings in the north where he is not popular, there will be trouble. That is not just grammar. That is not TV talk. That is a signal. Because what he is exposing here is something dangerous that many politicians pretend not to see. The North is not calm. The North is not okay. The North is washing. And let me tell you something as pure signal. You can manipulate narrative. You can control headlines. You can buy endorsements. But you cannot fake real voters' anger. And that is the part these politicians always ignore until it's too late. Because Professor didn't just talk about election. He talks about betrayal. He's talking about constituency that gave you over 60% and now feel abandoned. Now, combine that with hunger, insecurity, silence from leadership, perception of bias, suppression of opposition voices. You are not building democracy anymore. You are building pressure. And pressure always look quiet until it explodes. Now here is where it gets even more serious. Because this isn't just about Bola Ahmed Tinubu anymore. This is about a system where agencies are accused of being weaponized. Opposition figures are allegedly targeted. Voices are being intimidated. And once citizens start believing that the system is no longer fair, that is when elections stop being trusted. And when elections are not trusted, that is when countries enter dangerous territory. And let me say something a lot of people are afraid to say. Nigeria is walking on a very thin line right now. Very thin. Because you cannot shout free and fair election, then produce results from that belief. That gap is between what people see and what they are told. The gap is where crisis is born. And Professor is basically saying, don't create that gap. Because once people believe their votes don't count, they stop waiting for bylaws. And that is where things get out of control. Now, look, I am not here to hype fear, but I will never lie to you. This is no longer about party. This is no longer about APC, PDP, Labour Party, this is about trust. And once trust is broken at a national level, you don't fix it with press conference. You don't fix it with propaganda. You fix it with action. So the real question Nigeria should be asking right now is not who will win in 2027. No. The real question is, will Nigeria believe the result when it comes out? Because if they don't, then everything Professor just warned about, everything becomes reality. And that is the part nobody is ready to talk about openly, but we talk about it here. Always, no fear. What are your thoughts? Drop it in the comment section. Like, subscribe and share this video. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.